The door splintered open and Cole Maddox froze. There she was, half-dressed, trembling eyes blazing with something between terror and defiance. Before he could speak, her voice cut through the rain-soaked silence. "You've seen me undressed. Now you must marry me or they'll kill us both." Outside, boots thundered up the stairs. Inside, a man who'd sworn never to save anyone again had less than 30 seconds to decide. Some choices don't wait for courage, they demand it. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The rain came down like bullets on the tin roofs of Las Cruces, New Mexico territory in the autumn of 1879. It was the kind of rain that turned the streets into rivers of mud and made honest men keep their heads down and their business to themselves. Cole Maddox had learned long ago that keeping his head down was the best way to stay alive. He stood under the sagging porch of Brennan's boarding house, water dripping from the brim of his hat, watching the street with eyes that had seen too much. 3 days' stubble darkened his jaw, and the scar that ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, a gift from a Comanche lance 5 years back, caught the lamplight from inside. He'd come to collect payment for a freight run to Fort Selden, nothing more. Get the money, get a hot meal, get gone. That was the plan. The plan lasted until he heard the cry. It was muffled, distant, the kind of sound that most men would ignore or pretend not to hear. Cole had spent 6 years as a cavalry scout before the army decided he was too independent for their taste. In that time, he'd learned to hear the sounds that others missed, the crack of a twig that meant an ambush, the change in birdsong that meant riders approaching, the quality of silence that meant death was close. This wasn't silence, this was desperation. He pushed away from the post and moved down the hallway, his hand instinctively dropping to the Colt Navy revolver on his hip. The boarding house was mostly empty this time of night. The working men were at the saloons and the respectable families were locked behind their doors, pretending the world outside didn't exist. The sound came again, clearer now, a woman's voice, low and urgent, speaking words he didn't understand. Apache, maybe. He'd heard enough of it during his scouting days to recognize the rhythm, even if he couldn't make out the meaning. The door at the end of the hall was slightly ajar, and lamplight spilled through the crack. Cole approached quietly, every instinct screaming that he should turn around, walk away, mind his own damn business. He'd learned that lesson the hard way more times than he cared to remember. The world was full of suffering, and one man couldn't fix it all. Trying only got you killed, or worse, got someone else killed. But his boots kept moving forward. He pushed the door open with one finger, and the scene inside made his jaw tighten. The room was small, barely large enough for the iron bed frame and washstand that occupied it. A single lamp burned on the table, casting long shadows across the walls. And there, pressed against the far corner like a trapped animal, was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her skin was the color of desert sand at sunset, her hair black as midnight and falling loose around her shoulders. She wore only a thin cotton shift that had been torn at the shoulder, and her feet were bare. But it was her eyes that stopped Cole, cold, dark, fierce, burning, with a pride that no amount of humiliation could extinguish. "Get out," she said in English, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "You have no right to be here." Cole raised both hands slowly, showing they were empty. "I heard. I don't care what you heard." She pulled the torn fabric across her chest, her chin lifting. "Leave, now." That's when Cole noticed the other details. The window had been nailed shut from the outside. The door had fresh gouges in the wood around the lock, as if someone had forced their way in or prevented someone from getting out. And on the floor near the bed, a leather strap with rust-colored stains that might have been blood. "Who's keeping you here?" Cole asked quietly. Her laugh was bitter. "Who isn't the merchant who bought me from the raid survivors? The sheriff who looks the other way, because the merchant pays his salary. The women in this town who cross the street when they see me, because I'm ruined goods. She spat the last words like poison. The only question is which man gets to claim me next. Cole had seen this before. After the Apache raids, after the counter raids, after the endless cycle of violence that defined the frontier, there were always survivors. And the survivors, especially the women, were treated like property passed from hand to hand, their humanity stripped away one transaction at a time. "What's your name?" he asked. She studied him for a long moment, suspicion and calculation warring in her expression. "Why do you care?" "Because I asked." Another pause, then quietly, "Tahana. It means dawn in my language. I'm Cole. I don't care what your name is." But something in her posture had shifted just slightly. She was still pressed against the wall, still ready to fight or flee, but she was watching him differently now. "You should go before someone sees you here." "Who's going to see me?" "The men who are coming too." She stopped, her eyes cutting to the hallway. "You need to go, now." That's when Cole heard it too, boots on the stairs, heavy, purposeful, more than one man. "How many?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "3, usually." Tahana's hand moved to the washstand where a small knife lay hidden behind the basin. "Sometimes 4. Cole's mind raced through the options. The window was nailed shut. The door was the only way out, and men were already in the hallway. He could try to talk his way past them, claim he'd taken a wrong turn, but the look on Tahana's face told him these weren't the kind of men who accepted excuses. "You've seen me undressed," Tahana said suddenly, her voice carrying a strange formality. She straightened, dropping her hands to her sides, and met his eyes directly. "By my people's law, that makes you responsible for me. You must marry me or they'll kill us both." Cole blinked. "What? Among my people, if a man sees a woman in this state of exposure, he must either marry her to preserve her honor or he's considered to have ruined her." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "If you walk away now, they'll say you violated me. They'll hang you, and they'll give me to someone worse than the merchant." "That's not—" "It doesn't matter if it's true," Tahana interrupted. "It only matters what they'll believe. And in this town, they'll believe anything that lets them do what they want." The boots were closer now. Cole could hear voices, rough male, already half drunk. One of them laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin can. "You sure she's still here, Brennan? Where else would she go? I nailed the damn window myself." Cole looked at Tahana, then at the window, then back at Tahana. Every instinct he'd honed over 6 years of surviving the frontier told him to walk away, to let her fight her own battle, to save himself while he still could. But he'd spent 6 years following those instincts, and where had they gotten him alone? Bitter, waking up every morning wondering why he'd bothered to survive at all. "How strong are you?" he asked. Tahana's eyes narrowed. "Strong enough." "Good." Cole crossed to the window in 3 strides and drove his elbow through the glass. The nailed boards held, but the glass shattered outward. He grabbed the washstand and swung it at the boards, once, twice. The door burst open. 3 men filled the doorway. The one in front was broad and bearded, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. Behind him, 2 younger men with the lean, hungry look of ranch hands who'd never quite made it past being hired muscle. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" the bearded man Brennan demanded. Cole didn't answer. He swung the washstand again, and this time the board splintered. Rain and cold air rushed in through the gap. "Stop him!" Brennan lunged forward, but Cole was already moving. He grabbed his coat from where it had fallen and threw it at Tahana. "Put this on and go." She caught the coat but didn't move. "They'll catch us." "Not if you run." Cole drew his Colt and the 3 men froze. "You want to test me, Brennan? I've got 6 shots and plenty of time to think about which one of you deserves the first one." Brennan raised his hands slowly, his eyes never leaving the gun. "You don't understand what you're doing, mister. That girl is property, bought and paid for. You take her out of here, you're a thief." "Funny," Cole said, his voice cold. "I always thought people couldn't be property. The law says different. The law can go to hell. One of the younger men shifted his weight, his hand drifting toward his belt. Cole cocked the hammer on the Colt, the click impossibly loud in the small room. "Don't," Cole said quietly. "I've killed men for less than what you're thinking right now." The young man froze. Behind Cole, Tahana had shrugged into the coat. It hung to her knees, far too large, but it covered her. She moved to the window, her bare feet crunching on broken glass. "There's a wagon around the corner," Cole said without taking his eyes off the three men. "Keys are in the lockbox under the seat. Get it started." "You're not coming. I'm right behind you." Tahana hesitated for one heartbeat too. Then she climbed through the window and disappeared into the rain. Cole backed toward the window, the Colt still trained on Brennan. "You're going to count to 50 before you follow us. Nice and slow. Can you count that high, Brennan, or should I make it easier for you?" Brennan's face darkened. "You're a dead man." "Maybe, but you won't be the one to make me that way." Cole reached the window, felt the cold air and rain on his back. "One last thing, if I see you following us, I won't aim to miss. You understand me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and dove through the window, landing in the muddy alley below. The impact drove the breath from his lungs, but he was up and running before he could think about the pain. The alley opened onto a side street, and there, parked in the shadows between two buildings, was his freight wagon. Tahana was already in the driver's seat, her hands on the reins, her face pale but determined. Cole vaulted up beside her and grabbed the reins. "Hold on." He cracked the whip and the horses lunged forward. Behind them, shouts erupted from the boarding house. A gunshot cracked through the rain, but the bullet went wide, burying itself in the mud. They careened around the corner and onto the main street, the wagon's wheels throwing up great fans of water. The town was a blur of lamplight and shadow, and then they were past it, racing into the darkness beyond. For the first mile, neither of them spoke. Cole kept the horses at a hard gallop, listening for pursuit, expecting at any moment to hear the thunder of hoofbeats behind them. But the night remained empty except for the rain. Finally, when the lights of Las Cruces had faded to nothing and the road had narrowed to little more than a track through the desert scrub, Cole eased the horses to a trot. His hands were shaking from cold or adrenaline, he couldn't tell. Beside him, Tahana sat rigid, the coat wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her feet were bleeding from the broken glass, and her hair hung in wet ropes around her face. But her eyes were dry, and when she looked at him, there was no gratitude in her expression, only calculation. "Why did you do that?" she asked. Cole stared at the road ahead. "I don't know. Men don't risk their lives for nothing. What do you want from me?" "Nothing." "I don't believe you." "Believe what you want." Cole guided the horses around a washed-out section of road. "I heard you in that room. I saw what they were planning to do. I couldn't just walk away." "Why not everyone else does?" The question hung in the rain-soaked air between them. Cole didn't have a good answer. The truth was, he'd been asking himself the same question since the moment he kicked open that door. "I've walked away from a lot of things in my life," he said finally. "Most of them I regret. I figured one more regret wasn't something I could carry." Tahana was silent for a long moment. Then, "They'll come after us." "I know. Brennan won't give up. Men like him never do. They need to win to prove they're in control." "I know that too. So what's your plan?" Cole laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Plan, lady, I've been making this up as I go since the moment I heard you crying. My name is Tahana." "Right, sorry." He glanced at her. "How far to the nearest town that isn't Las Cruces?" "North, maybe 2 days if the rain stops." "Socorro, but they'll expect us to go there." "Then we go somewhere they don't expect." "Where?" Cole thought about it. His knowledge of the territory was good. 6 years of scouting had etched every trail and water source into his memory. But that also meant Brennan could hire someone who knew the same trails, someone who could track them through the desert like following a painted line. "East," he said, "into the mountains. There's old mining country up there, abandoned camps and line shacks. We can lose them in the high country circle back south when things cool down. And then what? And then, I don't know, Mexico maybe, California. Somewhere you can start over. Tahana pulled the coat tighter. You keep saying you, as if you're not running too. I can handle myself. Can you? She turned to look at him fully, and in the darkness her eyes were bright and hard. You just made yourself an enemy of every man in Las Cruces. They'll put a price on your head. They'll say you kidnapped me, raped me, murdered someone. Whatever story makes them the heroes and you the villain. You can't go back to your old life any more than I can go back to mine. Cole opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. The moment he'd pulled her out of that window, he'd severed every tie he had to whatever passed for civilization in this territory. There would be no more freight runs, no more quiet nights in boarding houses, no more pretending he could live a normal life. So what do you suggest? He asked. Keep moving, don't trust anyone, and pray to whatever God you believe in that we make it through the next 3 days. That's not much of a plan. Tahana's smile was grim. It's better than what I had an hour ago. They rode on through the rain, two fugitives bound together by circumstance and desperation. The night pressed close around them, and somewhere behind in the darkness, Cole knew men were already saddling horses and loading rifles. The hunt had begun. As dawn broke over the eastern mountains, thin and gray through the dissipating rain, Cole guided the wagon off the main road and into a narrow canyon. The walls rose steep on either side, studded with juniper and pinyon pine, and a small creek ran along the bottom, swollen with runoff, but still crossable. He found a spot where an overhang of rock provided shelter from the last of the rain and pulled the horses to a stop. They were exhausted, their flanks heaving, and he knew they couldn't go much farther without rest. Tahana climbed down from the wagon without a word. Her feet left small bloodstains on the rocks, but she didn't complain. She walked to the creek and knelt, washing the cuts with water so cold it must have hurt. Cole unhitched the horses and led them to drink, then hobbled them in a patch of grass near the water. From the back of the wagon he pulled out a canvas tarp and his bedroll, along with a tin of hardtack and a canteen of whiskey. When he returned to the overhang, Tahana was sitting with her back against the rock, her eyes closed. She'd cleaned the worst of the mud from her face, but she still looked like she'd been dragged through hell. Here, Cole said, offering the canteen. She opened her eyes and looked at it. What is it? Whiskey. Not much, but it'll help with the cold. She took it, sniffed it, and drank. Her face didn't change, but she coughed once and handed it back. Thank you. Cole took a drink himself, then set the canteen aside. He opened the tin of hardtack and offered it to her. It's not much. It's more than I've had in 2 days. She took a piece and bit into it, chewing slowly. Brennan decided I didn't deserve food until I learned my place. The casual cruelty of it made Cole's jaw tighten, but he didn't say anything. What was there to say? The frontier was full of men like Brennan, men who saw other human beings as things to be used and discarded. Tell me about these men who are following us, Cole said. Who are they? What do they want? Tahana finished chewing before she answered. Brennan owns the boarding house and half the businesses in Las Cruces. He trades in anything that makes money: cattle, horses, guns, people. 6 months ago, his men were with a group that attacked my village. Most of my people were killed. The survivors were sold to ranchers and traders up and down the territory. And you, I fought. I killed one of Brennan's men with his own knife. Her voice was flat, emotionless. So instead of selling me to a rancher, Brennan decided to keep me for himself, as a lesson, to show me what happens to women who fight back. Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. How long? 6 months. She met his eyes. 6 months of being his property, of being told I should be grateful he didn't just shoot me, of watching other women in the same situation give up, stop fighting, stop being human. But you didn't give up. No. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. I waited. I learned. And when Brennan came to my room tonight, drunk and careless, I was ready. I got the knife from the washstand, and I cut him not deep, not enough to kill, but enough to make him angry. Enough to make him leave and come back with his men to teach me a lesson. You planned it. I planned to die fighting. What you did running, escaping, that wasn't part of the plan. She looked at him, and for the first time something like uncertainty showed in her expression. Why didn't you just leave me? You could have walked away. You could have told Brennan you didn't see anything. Instead, you risked your life for a stranger. Cole was quiet for a long time. The truth was, he didn't have a good answer. He'd spent 6 years building walls around himself, convincing himself that caring about other people was a luxury he couldn't afford. And yet when he'd heard her voice in that room, all those walls had crumbled like they were made of sand. I had a sister once, he said finally. Mary. She was 16 when the Comanche took her. I was with the cavalry out on patrol. By the time we got back to the settlement, it was too late. We found her body 3 days later. Tahana said nothing, but her eyes never left his face. The men who found her, they weren't kind about it. They made jokes. They said things about what must have happened to her, about what she probably deserved. And I just stood there and listened because I was too much of a coward to tell them to shut up. He took another drink from the canteen. I've been living with that for 5 years, living with the knowledge that when my sister needed someone to stand up for her dignity, even after she was dead, I was too weak to do it. So you're trying to make up for it. Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of being a coward. Tahana studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched the scar on his face, her fingers light and surprisingly gentle. This wasn't from the Comanche, was it? No. Cole's voice was rough. It was from the man who made the jokes about Mary. I told him to shut up. He didn't like that. Did you kill him? No, but I wanted to. She withdrew her hand. Then you're a better man than he deserved. They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the clouds. The canyon around them came alive with birdsong and the rustle of small animals in the brush. For a few minutes it was almost possible to forget they were being hunted. Then Tahana spoke again, her voice low and urgent. They're coming. Cole was on his feet instantly, his hand on his gun. How do you know? Listen. He listened. At first he heard nothing but the usual sounds of the canyon, but then faint and distant carried on the wind, the jingle of harness and the low murmur of voices. Riders, at least 3, maybe more. How far? Cole asked. A mile, maybe less. They're following the creek bed. Tahana was already moving, gathering up the tarp and bedroll. We need to go, now. Cole didn't argue. He helped her load everything back into the wagon, then led the horses out of their hobbles. The animals were still tired, but they'd have to push through. There was no other choice. As they climbed back into the wagon, Cole caught Tahana's eye. You ready for this? Her answer was steady, unflinching. I've been ready my whole life. He cracked the reins, and the wagon lurched forward deeper into the canyon toward whatever waited ahead. The canyon narrowed as they pushed deeper into the mountains, the walls closing in until there was barely room for the wagon to pass. Cole kept the horses moving at a steady pace, not so fast that they'd stumble on the rocky ground, but not so slow that whoever was behind them would catch up. Every few minutes he'd glance back over his shoulder, searching for signs of pursuit. Tahana sat beside him, her body tense, her eyes scanning the ridgeline above them. She'd torn strips from the hem of her shift and wrapped them around her feet, makeshift bandages that were already staining red. But she hadn't complained once, and Cole found himself respecting that more than he wanted to admit. There, she said, suddenly pointing to a gap in the canyon wall. We can leave the wagon. Cole pulled the horses to a stop and looked where she was pointing. It was barely visible, a narrow cleft in the rock, shadowed and easy to miss if you didn't know to look for it. Where does it lead? Higher ground. My people used it sometimes when hunting. She climbed down from the wagon, wincing as her feet touched the ground. The wagon won't fit, but we can go on foot. They'll waste time searching for us down here. It made sense. The wagon left tracks that a blind man could follow, and the creek bed was a natural funnel. Anyone with half a brain would know they'd come this way, but if they could get up into the rocks, leave the wagon as a decoy, they might buy themselves enough time to disappear. "How far to the top?" Cole asked as he unhitched the horses. "An hour, maybe 2. The path is steep." Tahana was already gathering supplies from the wagon, the bedroll, the canteen, what was left of the hardtack. "Can you shoot?" "Better than most." "Good. You'll need to." She pulled his rifle from its scabbard and checked the action, her movements practiced and efficient. Brennan's men aren't good trackers, but they're mean. They'll shoot first and ask questions never. Cole took the rifle from her and slung it over his shoulder, then loaded a canvas bag with ammunition and the few other supplies they'd need. The horses he led to a patch of grass and left them ground-tied. They'd either stay or they wouldn't. There was nothing more he could do for them now. Tahana was already moving toward the cleft in the rock, and Cole followed his boots, slipping on loose scree. The passage was barely wide enough for his shoulders, and he had to turn sideways in places to squeeze through. Above them the sky was a narrow ribbon of blue, and the sound of their breathing echoed off the stone walls. They climbed in silence, saving their breath for the effort. The path, if it could be called that, was treacherous, winding up through jumbled boulders and across slopes of loose rock that shifted underfoot. More than once, Cole felt his balance tip, felt gravity pulling him backward, and only caught himself at the last second. Tahana moved ahead of him with the sure-footedness of someone who'd grown up in this country. Her bare feet found purchase where his boots slipped, and she seemed to know instinctively which rocks would hold and which would give way. She didn't offer to help him, and he didn't ask. They both understood that this was a test of strength of will, of whether they could survive what was coming. After what felt like hours, the passage opened onto a narrow ledge. Cole pulled himself up and stood, his lungs burning, his shirt soaked with sweat, despite the cool mountain air. Below them, the canyon stretched out like a map, and there, just entering the narrow section where they'd left the wagon, were 4 riders. "Brennan," Tahana said softly, her voice tight with anger. Cole studied the men through the scope of his rifle. The bearded man was in the lead, his face red even from this distance. Behind him came the 2 younger men from the boarding house, and a 4th rider Cole didn't recognize, lean and hard-looking, with the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle. "Who's the 4th one?" Cole asked. "Tracker, probably. Brennan's not smart enough to follow a trail on his own." Tahana crouched beside him, her eyes never leaving the riders below. "He'll find the wagon in the next few minutes. After that, it depends on how good he is." They watched in silence as the riders reached the wagon. Even from this distance, Cole could see Brennan's rage in the way he gestured, the way he wheeled his horse around searching. The tracker dismounted and walked the area, studying the ground, and Cole felt his stomach tighten. "He's good," Tahana murmured. The tracker was looking up, his eyes scanning the canyon walls. He pointed to something, the cleft in the rock probably, and said something to Brennan. The bearded man shook his head, gestured back the way they'd come, but the tracker wasn't backing down. He pointed again, more insistently. "They're arguing," Cole said. "Brennan wants to keep following the creek bed. The tracker knows better." Tahana's voice was calm, but her hands were clenched into fists. "If the tracker wins, they'll find this path. If Brennan wins, we have time." For a long moment, the argument continued. Then Brennan turned his horse and rode back down the canyon, the 2 younger men following. The tracker stood alone for a moment, still looking up at the canyon walls, and Cole held his breath. Then the tracker mounted his horse and followed Brennan. Cole let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "We got lucky." "Luck has nothing to do with it. Brennan's pride just bought us a few hours." Tahana stood brushing dust from her borrowed coat. "But the tracker will convince him eventually. We need to be far from here when that happens." They moved along the ledge, following it as it curved around the mountainside. The going was easier now, the path wider, and within another hour they'd reached a high plateau studded with pine trees and carpeted with brown grass. A cold wind blew across the open space, carrying the scent of snow from the peaks above. Cole stopped to catch his breath and take a drink from the canteen. When he offered it to Tahana, she drank deeply, then handed it back without meeting his eyes. "Something wrong?" he asked. "You could have stayed in that canyon, could have left me to climb alone." She was staring out at the mountains, her profile sharp against the sky. "I'm trying to understand why you didn't. I told you. You told me about your sister, about guilt." She turned to face him. "But guilt doesn't make a man risk his life. Fear does. Greed does. Love does. Guilt just makes you feel bad while you do nothing." Cole felt anger flash through him, hot and sudden. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're running from something. I know you've got scars that go deeper than the one on your face." Her eyes were hard, challenging. "I know that men don't throw away their lives for strangers unless they've already decided their lives aren't worth keeping." The words hit him like a physical blow, and for a moment he couldn't speak, because she was right. Ever since Mary's death, ever since he'd watched the cavalry move on to the next patrol, while her body was still warm in the ground, he'd been going through the motions of living without really being alive. He'd told himself it was survival, that he was just being practical. But the truth was simpler and darker. He'd stopped caring whether he lived or died, until last night, until he'd heard her voice in that room and something inside him had woken up. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe I don't value my life the way I should. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stand by and watch someone else lose theirs." Tahana's expression softened just slightly. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish. Can't I be both?" The ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I suppose you can." She started walking again, and Cole fell into step beside her. "Where did you learn to handle a rifle like that?" "Army. 6th Cavalry, Fort Stanton. I was a scout for 3 years, then a sharpshooter for another 3. "Why'd you leave?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "I didn't leave. They asked me to go. Seems I had a problem with following orders I didn't agree with." "What kind of orders?" "The kind that involved burning villages and calling it pacification." The memory still tasted bitter. "My commanding officer said we were bringing civilization to the savages. I said we were murdering families in their sleep. He didn't appreciate the distinction." Tahana stopped walking and turned to look at him. Really look at him, as if seeing him for the first time. "You refused." "I refused. They gave me a choice: follow orders or face a court-martial. I chose the court-martial." He shrugged. "They decided it was easier to just discharge me than deal with the paperwork. So you sacrificed your career for people you didn't know." "I sacrificed my career because I couldn't live with myself otherwise. There's a difference." They walked on in silence, and Cole felt something shift between them. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the possibility of trust. The recognition that maybe, just maybe, they were both running from the same kind of demons. The plateau ended at a rocky slope that descended into a narrow valley. Below, Cole could see a thin trail of smoke rising from the trees, a campfire or maybe a chimney. The sight of it made him tense. "Someone's down there," he said. Tahana nodded. "Line shack, probably. Miners used to work these mountains looking for silver. Most gave up years ago, but some of the cabins are still standing. Could be empty. Could be occupied by someone worse than Brennan." Cole checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded and ready. Only one way to find out. They descended the slope carefully, using the trees for cover, stopping every few yards to listen. The smoke grew thicker as they approached, and Cole could smell food, cooking beans and bacon, the scent making his stomach growl despite the danger. The cabin sat in a small clearing, its walls weathered gray, and its roof patched with sheets of rusted tin. A single horse was tied to a post out front, and through the window Cole could see the flicker of firelight. "Stay here," he told Tahana. "No. If someone's in there, then you'll need someone watching your back." She picked up a fallen branch, testing its weight. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. I'm not hiding while you take all the risk. Cole wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes told him it would be pointless. Fine, but stay behind me and don't do anything unless I tell you to. They approached the cabin from the side using the trees for cover until they were close enough to hear voices from inside. A man's voice low and rough, and then another voice younger, nervous. Cole moved to the window and peered inside. Two men sat at a rough wooden table eating from tin plates. The older one was in his 50s with gray hair and a face like old leather. The younger one couldn't have been more than 20, with sandy hair and the kind of face that probably got him in trouble in saloons. Neither of them looked like they were with Brennan. Cole made a decision. He walked to the door and knocked his rifle held loosely, but ready. The conversation inside stopped. Then the door opened a crack and the older man peered out, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Help you?" he asked, his tone wary. "My wife and I are traveling through," Cole said, putting a slight emphasis on the word wife. "We saw your smoke. Wondered if you might have food to spare. We can pay." The man's eyes flicked to Tahana, taking in her wrapped feet and torn clothing, then back to Cole. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he opened the door wider. "Come in," he said, "both of you, and put that rifle away before someone gets hurt." Cole hesitated, every instinct screaming at him not to trust this stranger, but they needed food and they needed information about the country ahead. And if these men meant them harm, they'd already had plenty of opportunity to shoot through the window. He lowered the rifle and stepped inside Tahana, close behind him. The cabin was small and sparse, with bunks along one wall and a potbelly stove in the corner. The two men had returned to their seats at the table, but the younger one was watching them with undisguised curiosity. "Name's Jack Reeves," the older man said. "This is my nephew Billy. We're working a claim about 2 miles north of here." "Cole Maddox, this is my wife Tahana." The lie came easier the second time. Jack's eyes lingered on Tahana for a moment, and Cole tensed, but all the man said was, "You two look like you've had a hard run. Sit, there's food in the pot." Billy brought them plates and spoons, and Cole and Tahana ate in silence, too hungry to make conversation. The beans were hot and filling the bacon greasy and perfect, and for a few minutes the world narrowed down to the simple pleasure of a warm meal. When they'd finished, Jack leaned back in his chair and studied them. "You in trouble?" Cole met his gaze. "What makes you think that?" "Because I've been in trouble before and I recognize the look." Jack gestured to Tahana's feet. "And because your wife's bleeding through those bandages and you're carrying a rifle like you expect someone to come through that door shooting." There was no point in lying. "There are men following us. 4 of them, maybe more. They'll be coming up through the canyon we just left." "What did you do?" "Took something that didn't belong to them." Cole glanced at Tahana. "Or someone, depending on how you look at it." Jack's expression didn't change. "They close, a few hours behind, maybe less." The old miner was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he nodded. "There's a trail that runs north from here, follows the ridgeline for about 10 miles before dropping down to the old Silverton Road. If you leave now, you can be on that road by nightfall." "Why are you helping us?" Tahana asked, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the cabin. Jack looked at her, and something in his weathered face softened. "Because 30 years ago I was running from men who thought they had a right to own another person, and someone helped me get away. I figure I owe the universe a debt." Billy had been quiet during the exchange, but now he stood up and walked to one of the bunks. From underneath he pulled out a pair of old boots. "These were my mother's," he said, offering them to Tahana. "They're probably too big, but they're better than nothing." Tahana took the boots, her fingers trembling slightly. "I can't." "You can," Billy said firmly. "Ma would have wanted someone to use them, and she definitely would have wanted them to go to someone who needed them." Cole felt something tight in his chest loosen. Kindness was rare on the frontier, and when it appeared, it felt almost miraculous. They stayed long enough for Tahana to change her bandages and put on the boots, and for Jack to draw them a rough map of the trail ahead. Then they were moving again, climbing north along the ridgeline as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The trail was narrow but clear, winding through stands of aspen and across meadows where deer scattered at their approach. Cole kept a steady pace, not pushing too hard, but not letting them rest for long. Behind them, the canyon where they'd left the wagon was hidden by distance and trees, but he knew Brennan was back there somewhere, still searching. As the light began to fade, they reached a high point where the trail dropped away steeply to the east. Below, perhaps 1,000 feet down, Cole could see the glint of water and the dark line of a road cutting through the valley. "The Silverton Road," Tahana said. "Once we're down there, we can follow it west. There are towns, small ones, but big enough to disappear in." Cole studied the descent. It would take at least an hour to make it down, and by then it would be full dark. "We should camp here tonight. Start fresh in the morning when we can see where we're going." Tahana nodded, too tired to argue. They found a sheltered spot among some rocks out of the wind, and Cole built a small fire using deadfall and dry grass. The flames were comforting in the growing darkness, a small circle of warmth and light against the vast, empty night. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, not speaking, each lost in their own thoughts. Cole found himself watching Tahana in the firelight, the way the shadows played across her face, the way her eyes reflected the flames. She was beautiful in a fierce, uncompromising way, not soft or delicate, but strong and real. "Why didn't you fight me?" she asked suddenly. "In the boarding house. You could have. You could have done what the others wanted to do. I couldn't have stopped you." Cole looked down at his hands. "Because I've seen what that does to people. I've seen women after they've been—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I've seen what it takes from them, and I decided a long time ago I'd never be that kind of man. Not all men make that decision. No, they don't." He met her eyes across the fire. "But that doesn't mean I deserve credit for basic human decency." Tahana smiled, a real smile this time, not the bitter half-curve he'd seen before. "You're a strange man, Cole Maddox. I've been called worse." They fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now, comfortable, almost companionable. Cole added more wood to the fire and watched the sparks spiral up into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and another answered. "Cole," Tahana said after a while, her voice soft. "If we make it through this, if we get away from Brennan and his men, what then?" It was a question Cole had been avoiding thinking about, because the truth was he had no idea. His old life was gone, burned to ash the moment he'd pulled her through that window. And her old life, what was left of it, was even more impossible to return to. "I don't know," he admitted. "Find somewhere safe, I guess. Somewhere you can start over." "What about you?" "I'll figure something out. I always do." Tahana was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You told Brennan I was your wife. You told Jack the same thing. If we're going to keep telling that lie, maybe we should talk about what it means." Cole felt his heart rate pick up. "It doesn't have to mean anything. It's just a story to keep you safe." "Is it?" She leaned forward, her eyes intense in the firelight. "Because where I come from, when a man claims a woman as his wife, it's not just words. It's a promise, a bond. It means he's responsible for her protection, and she's responsible for his honor." "I don't expect anything from you," Cole said quickly. "I know, that's what makes you different." Tahana stood and walked around the fire until she was standing directly in front of him. "Among my people, when a man sees a woman in a state of undress, as you saw me, and chooses to protect her rather than take advantage, it creates a debt. Not of property, but of respect. I owe you my life, Cole Maddox, and I don't take that lightly." Cole stood up, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "You don't owe me anything. What I did, anyone would have done the same." "No," Tahana said firmly. "They wouldn't have. You know that as well as I do." She reached up and touched his face, her hand warm against his skin. "You asked me earlier what happens if we survive this. I think the better question is, what do we do with the life we've been given? Do we waste it running forever, or do we build something new? Cole's breath caught in his throat. He'd spent 5 years running from his past, from his guilt, from his own humanity. And now this woman, this fierce, damaged, impossibly brave woman, was asking him to stop running, to stand still, to build instead of destroy. "I don't know if I can," he said honestly. "I don't know if I know how anymore." "Then we'll learn together." She smiled, and in that moment, with the firelight dancing across her face and the vast darkness of the mountains all around them, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He reached up and covered her hand with his own. "If we're going to do this, if we're really going to try, you need to know something. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at letting people in, at trusting at any of it. I'll probably mess it up." "Probably," Tahana agreed. "But that's all right. I'm not exactly easy to live with either." Cole laughed, the sound surprising him. "No, I don't imagine you are." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, and something passed between them, an understanding, an agreement. The first fragile threads of something that might, with time and care, become something stronger. Then Tahana pulled away and returned to her side of the fire. "Get some sleep, Cole. We have a long day tomorrow." He nodded and spread out his bedroll, but sleep was a long time coming. His mind kept turning over everything that had happened, everything that might happen, all the ways this could go wrong. But underneath the worry and the fear, there was something else, something he barely recognized: the possibility of a future. Dawn came cold and sharp, the sky turning from black to gray, to pale gold as the sun climbed over the eastern peaks. Cole woke to find Tahana already up, standing at the edge of the cliff and looking down at the valley below. She'd braided her hair back from her face, and in Billy's mother's boots and Cole's oversized coat, she looked like someone caught between two worlds, neither fully the captive she'd been, nor quite the free woman she was trying to become. Cole rolled up his bedroll and kicked dirt over the remains of the fire. His body ached from sleeping on hard ground, and his stomach growled with hunger they had no way to satisfy. The last of the hardtack was gone, and unless they found food in the valley below, it would be a hungry day. "Ready?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. Tahana nodded without taking her eyes from the valley. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about not knowing how to build something new. And I think you're wrong. You've already started building. You just don't realize it yet." She turned to face him, and her expression was serious. "Every choice you've made since you found me in that room has been about creating something better than what was there before. That's what building is." Cole wanted to argue, to tell her she was giving him too much credit, but the words wouldn't come. Maybe she was right. Maybe all his running, all his attempts to stay disconnected from the world, had been less about survival and more about fear, fear of caring, fear of losing someone else the way he'd lost Mary. "We should move," he said instead. The descent into the valley took longer than Cole had expected. The trail was steep and treacherous, winding back and forth across the face of the cliff in a series of switchbacks that made his legs burn and his head spin when he looked down. Loose rocks skittered away beneath their feet, tumbling hundreds of feet before disappearing into the brush below. Halfway down, they heard it, the distant sound of gunfire echoing through the mountains. Cole froze his hand instinctively, going to his rifle. "How far?" Tahana tilted her head, listening. "Hard to say. Sound carries strange in these mountains. Could be 5 miles, could be 10. But it's them. It's them." She resumed walking, but faster now, her movements urgent. They must have found the wagon, probably shot it up out of frustration. Cole followed his mind racing. If Brennan's men had found the wagon, then they knew which direction their prey had gone. It was only a matter of time before the tracker picked up their trail on the ridge. And once that happened, they'd be coming fast. They reached the valley floor as the sun climbed toward noon, emerging from the tree line onto a dirt road that ran east to west through the narrow valley. To the west, Cole could see a thin ribbon of smoke on the horizon, a town probably, or at least a settlement. To the east, The road disappeared into another range of mountains. Which way? Tahana asked. Cole thought about it. West meant civilization, which meant potential help, but also potential trouble. If Brennan had any connections in these parts, word of two fugitives would spread fast. East meant wilderness isolation, but also nowhere to get supplies or help if they needed it. West, he decided. We need food and man a horse. Can't keep running on foot forever. They walked along the road in silence, conserving their energy, their eyes constantly scanning the tree line for signs of pursuit. The valley was beautiful in a stark, harsh way, the kind of landscape that killed you if you weren't careful, but offered a kind of freedom that tamed country never could. After an hour, they came upon a small ranch house set back from the road. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Cole could see a woman hanging laundry on a line behind the house. A dog barked as they approached, and the woman turned, shading her eyes against the sun. Cole raised his hand in greeting. "Morning, ma'am. We're traveling through. Wondered if you might have work in exchange for a meal." The woman studied them for a long moment. She was in her 40s, weathered and strong-looking, with gray streaking her dark hair. Her eyes moved from Cole to Tahana and back again, taking in their worn appearance the rifle Cole carried, the tension in their bodies. "You two in trouble?" she asked, her voice flat and direct. There was no point in lying. "Yes, ma'am." "Law after you?" "No, ma'am, just men who think they have a claim on something that isn't theirs." The woman's eyes settled on Tahana again, and something in her expression shifted. "Come inside," she said. "Both of you, quickly." They followed her into the house, a simple two-room structure that was clean and spare. The woman closed the door behind them and went to the window, peering out at the road. "My name's Margaret Delaney," she said without turning around. "My husband's out checking the fence line, won't be back till dark. You're safe here until then, but after that, you'll need to be gone." "We appreciate your kindness," Cole said. "Don't thank me yet." Margaret turned from the window. "There's been men through here asking questions. 3 days ago, 4 riders came by looking for an Apache woman and the man who took her. They said there was a reward, $50 for information, $100 for the woman delivered alive." Cole felt his stomach drop. "What did you tell them?" "That I hadn't seen anyone matching that description. Same thing I told them when they came through yesterday." Margaret crossed her arms. "I don't hold with men treating women like property, regardless of what color their skin is or where they come from. My sister was sold into marriage when she was 15, killed herself before she turned 20. Tahana spoke for the first time since entering the house. "You're risking a lot for strangers." "Maybe, but I can live with that risk." Margaret moved to the stove and ladled soup from a pot into 2 bowls. "Eat, then we'll talk about where you're headed." The soup was thin but hot, with bits of potato and onion floating in it. Cole ate slowly, savoring each spoonful, while Margaret sat at the table and watched them with sharp, calculating eyes. "Those men who came through," she said after a while. "The one leading them, big man, lots of beard, mean eyes." "Brennan," Cole confirmed. "He's got a reputation in these parts. Runs most of the trade from Las Cruces to Socorro. Men like that don't give up easy, especially when someone makes them look foolish." She paused. "You're going to need more than luck to get away from him." "We're open to suggestions," Cole said. Margaret stood and went to a cabinet, pulling out a folded piece of paper. She spread it on the table, a hand-drawn map of the territory. "You're here," she said, pointing to a spot on the map. "Brennan's probably following the main road from the east. If you keep going west, you'll hit Socorro in 2 days, but that's where he'll expect you to go." "So what do we do instead?" "Head south. There's a pass through the mountains about 20 miles from here. It's rough country, and most folks don't know about it. On the other side is an old mission station, been abandoned for years, but the building's still sound. You can hole up there, wait for Brennan to pass by, then double back north." Tahana leaned forward, studying the map. "What's north?" "Santa Fe. It's a bigger town, more places to disappear, and the territorial marshal there is an honest man, rare as that is. If you can get to him, tell him your story, he might be able to help." It was the best plan they'd heard yet. Cole looked at Tahana and she nodded. "We'll take your advice," Cole said. "Thank you." Margaret refolded the map and handed it to him. "There's something else you should know. Brennan's not the only one looking for you. There was another man came through yesterday evening, quiet, professional looking, said he was tracking 2 people for the territorial government, claimed they were wanted for theft and assault." Cole's blood ran cold. What did he look like? Tall, dark coat, had eyes like a snake, cold and patient. Margaret's expression was grim. I didn't believe his story for a second. Man like that isn't working for any government. He's a bounty hunter and a good one from the look of him. Did you tell him anything? No, but he's not stupid. He'll figure out which way you went eventually. She stood and went to a trunk in the corner, pulling out a bundle wrapped in cloth. Take this. It's not much, but it'll help. Cole unwrapped the bundle to find dried meat, a small sack of cornmeal and a canteen. Mrs. Delaney, we can't. You can and you will. And stop calling me Mrs. Delaney like I'm some fine lady. It's Margaret. She crossed her arms again. Now listen carefully. When you get to the pass, look for a lightning-struck pine on the north side. There's a trail that starts just past it, barely visible, but it's there. Follow it up and over. Takes about 6 hours on foot if you push hard. Why are you doing this? Tahana asked quietly. Margaret's face softened. Because I believe people should be free to choose their own path. And because if more folks had helped my sister when she needed it, she might still be alive. She walked to the door and opened it, checking the road again. You should go now. Cut across the field behind the house and head south. Stay off the road as much as you can. Cole and Tahana stood gathering their meager supplies. As they reached the door, Margaret caught Cole's arm. One more thing, she said, her voice low. That girl of yours, she's strong, but everyone has a breaking point. Watch for it. And when it comes, you be ready to hold her together. Cole nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They left the house through the back door and crossed the field at a steady jog, moving between rows of dried corn stalks that rustled in the wind. Behind them, Margaret's house grew smaller, and Cole found himself hoping they'd never brought trouble to her door. The land rose gradually as they moved south, the valley giving way to rolling hills covered with sagebrush and juniper. They walked in silence for the most part, saving their breath, stopping only occasionally to drink from the canteen or check the map Margaret had given them. As the afternoon wore on, Cole noticed Tahana beginning to lag. Her face was pale beneath its tan, and she was favoring her left foot. The wrappings had come loose again, and he could see fresh blood on the borrowed boots. We need to stop, he said. We can't. If you collapse, we're both finished. Cole guided her to a flat rock in the shade of a juniper. Sit, let me look at your feet. She didn't argue, which told him how much pain she was in. Cole knelt and carefully removed the boots, wincing at what he found. The cuts from the broken glass had reopened and new blisters had formed where the 2 large boots had rubbed. He used water from the canteen to clean the wounds, then tore strips from his own shirt to make fresh bandages. You should leave me, Tahana said quietly. Cole looked up at her, startled. What? I'm slowing you down. Brennan's getting closer every hour, and now there's a bounty hunter too. Without me, you could move faster. You could get away. No. Cole, I said no. He finished wrapping her foot and moved to the other one. We started this together. We finish it together. That's foolish. Probably. But I've been making foolish choices since the moment I met you. Why stop now? Tahana was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached down and touched his hair, her fingers gentle. You're a good man, Cole Maddox. Better than you think you are. He didn't know what to say to that, so he focused on her feet, working in silence until both were wrapped and the boots were back on. When he stood, his knees popped, and he felt every one of his 32 years. They resumed walking slower now, but steady. The sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, Cole could see the dark line of the mountains Margaret had mentioned, and somewhere in those mountains was the pass that might save them. As darkness began to fall, they reached the foothills. Cole found the lightning-struck pine exactly where Margaret had said it would be, a tall, blackened skeleton reaching toward the sky. And just past it, barely visible in the fading light, was the trail. "We should camp here," Cole said. "Start fresh in the morning when we can see where we're going." But even as he said it, he heard something that made his blood freeze. Hoofbeats, distant but growing closer, coming from the direction they'd just traveled. "They found us," Tahana whispered. Cole grabbed her hand and pulled her off the trail into the deeper shadows beneath the trees. They crouched behind a fallen log, hardly daring to breathe as the sound of horses grew louder. 3 riders emerged from the gloom, moving at a steady pace along the road below. Even in the dim light, Cole recognized Brennan's bulk, and behind him the 2 younger men from the boarding house. But there was no sign of the tracker or the bounty hunter. The riders passed within 50 yards of where Cole and Tahana hid, close enough that Cole could hear their conversation. "Told you they'd come this way," Brennan was saying. "Delaney woman lied right to our faces. We should go back there and what?" One of the younger men interrupted. "Burn her house down, kill her husband. That'll bring the marshal for sure." "I don't care about the marshal. I want that Apache bitch back, and I want the man who took her hanging from a tree." Cole felt Tahana tense beside him, her hand moving to the knife at her belt. He put his hand on her arm, a silent warning to stay still. The riders continued past, their voices fading into the darkness. Cole waited until he couldn't hear them anymore, then waited another 10 minutes, just to be sure. "They're heading for the pass," Tahana said finally. "Then we can't go that way. We'll have to find another route." "There is no other route, not for 50 miles in either direction." She looked at him, and in the moonlight her eyes were bright and hard. "We're trapped." Cole's mind raced through their options. They couldn't go back. Brennan would have men watching the road. They couldn't go forward, not if Brennan was heading for the pass. And they couldn't stay here. Sooner or later, Brennan would come back this way, or the tracker would find their trail. "Then we do the only thing we can do," Cole said. "We go up and over before they expect us to. In the dark, that trail is treacherous even in daylight. Do we have a choice?" Tahana was silent for a moment. Then she stood, her jaw set with determination. "No, we don't." They climbed through the night, moving slowly and carefully along the narrow trail. The moon provided just enough light to see by, but every step was an act of faith. Loose rocks shifted beneath their feet, and more than once Cole felt himself teetering on the edge of a drop that could kill them both. Tahana moved ahead of him, her breathing labored but steady. She didn't complain, didn't ask to rest, just kept putting one foot in front of the other with a stubbornness that Cole found himself admiring more with each passing hour. They'd been climbing for perhaps 3 hours when Cole heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A footfall behind them, too heavy and deliberate to be an animal. He turned his hand, moving to his rifle, and saw a figure silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Tall, dark coat, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd tracked prey through worse terrain than this. The bounty hunter had found them. "Run," Cole said quietly to Tahana. "What about run?" She didn't argue. She turned and ran up the trail, her boots scrabbling on loose rock. Cole raised his rifle and fired a shot over the bounty hunter's head, a warning, not an attempt to kill. The figure didn't flinch, didn't stop, just kept coming with that same patient, unhurried stride. Cole fired again, this time aiming for the ground in front of the man's feet. The bullet sparked off rock, and finally the bounty hunter paused. "Smart man would turn around," Cole called out. "Walk away while he still can." The bounty hunter's voice came back calm and measured. "And a smart man wouldn't have gotten himself mixed up in this mess to begin with. But here we are. I don't want to kill you." "That's good, because you won't get the chance." The figure moved again, angling to the side, using the rocks for cover. "She's worth $200 now. Brennan raised the bounty. That's a lot of money to walk away from." "She's a person, not a bounty." Philosophically, I agree with you. Practically, it doesn't matter. The bounty hunter was closer now, perhaps 30 yards away, and closing. I'm going to take her back, and you're going to let me, or you're going to die on this mountain. Your choice. Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. He could take the shot, the range was good, the moonlight clear enough. But killing a man in cold blood, even a bounty hunter, wasn't something he was sure he could live with. The hesitation cost him. The bounty hunter moved with surprising speed, ducking behind a boulder and emerging on Cole's left. Before Cole could swing the rifle around, the man was on him, knocking the weapon aside and driving a fist into Cole's ribs. Cole went down the air, driven from his lungs, and rolled away just as the bounty hunter's boot came down where his head had been. He came up swinging, catching the man in the jaw, and they grappled on the narrow trail, each fighting for position. The bounty hunter was good, professional, controlled, wasting no movement. But Cole had survived 6 years on the frontier by being meaner and more desperate than the men he fought. He drove his knee into the other man's stomach and felt the grip on his arms loosen. They broke apart, both breathing hard. The bounty hunter had lost his hat, and in the moonlight Cole could see his face clearly for the first time, lean, scarred, with those cold snake eyes Margaret had described. "You're good," the bounty hunter said, not even winded. "Better than most, but not good enough." He reached for something at his belt, a knife probably, and that's when the rock hit him. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a fist, but Tahana had thrown it with all her strength, and it caught the bounty hunter square in the temple. He staggered, his hand going to his head, and Cole didn't waste the opportunity. He charged forward and hit the man with his shoulder, a full-body tackle that sent them both tumbling across the trail. They rolled once, twice, and then the edge was there, and they were falling. Cole felt gravity take hold, felt the sickening sensation of nothing beneath him. He grabbed blindly and caught hold of a gnarled root growing from the cliff face. The impact nearly tore his arm from its socket, but he held on his feet, scrabbling for purchase on the rock. The bounty hunter wasn't so lucky. Cole heard him hit the slope below, heard the sound of him sliding, crashing through brush, and then silence. Cole. Tahana was there, reaching down, her hands grabbing his wrist. "Don't let go." He didn't plan to. With her pulling and him climbing, he managed to haul himself back onto the trail. He lay there for a moment, his chest heaving, his entire body shaking with adrenaline. "Is he dead?" Tahana asked. Cole crawled to the edge and looked down. In the moonlight, he could just make out a dark shape on the slope far below, not moving. "I don't know, maybe." "We need to keep moving. If he's alive, he'll come after us again, and if he's dead, Brennan will find the body and know which way we went." She was right. Cole retrieved his rifle and they resumed climbing faster now, despite the danger. The trail seemed to go on forever, winding higher and higher into the mountains until Cole's legs were burning and his lungs screamed for air. Finally, just as the first gray light of dawn began to touch the eastern sky, they reached the top of the pass. The trail leveled out, and on the other side Cole could see the land dropping away into another valley. And there, perhaps 2 miles distant in the growing light, stood the ruins of an old mission. They'd made it. The descent into the valley was easier than the climb had been, though Cole's muscles screamed with every step. Exhaustion had settled into his bones like a weight he couldn't shake, and beside him Tahana moved with the mechanical determination of someone running on willpower alone. Neither of them had slept in over 30 hours, and the fight with the bounty hunter had taken what little reserves Cole had left. The mission came into view as they reached the valley floor, its adobe walls crumbling but still standing, the bell tower listing to one side like a drunk, trying to stay upright. The morning sun painted everything gold and orange, and for a moment the ruin looked almost beautiful. A testament to faith abandoned but not quite forgotten. They approached cautiously, Cole's rifle at the ready despite his exhaustion. But the mission was as empty as Margaret had promised. The wooden door hung crooked on its hinges, and inside dust lay thick on everything. The pews had long since been carried off for firewood, and birds nested in the exposed rafters. But the walls were solid, and more importantly, there was a well in the courtyard with clear, cold water. Cole dropped his pack and rifle and went straight to the well, hauling up bucket after bucket and drinking until his stomach sloshed. Tahana joined him, her hands shaking as she cupped water to her mouth. When they'd both drunk their fill, they sat with their backs against the well, too tired to move any farther. "We should keep watch," Tahana said, though her eyes were already closing. "We should," Cole agreed. "But if Brennan finds us right now, I'm not sure I could fight him off, even if I wanted to." "That's not reassuring. It's honest." He looked at her, at the dirt smudged across her face and the exhaustion carved into every line of her body. "How are your feet?" "They hurt." "That's honest, too." She smiled faintly. "We make a good pair, don't we? Both too tired to lie." Cole stood his knees, protesting, and offered her his hand. "Come on, let's find somewhere inside where we can actually rest. A few hours of sleep and we'll be able to think straight again." The mission's interior was mostly open space, but there were two small rooms at the back that had once served as living quarters for the priests. One still had a door that closed, and the window, though empty of glass, was small and high enough to be defensible. Cole spread out his bedroll on the floor and gestured for Tahana to lie down. "What about you?" she asked. "I'll take first watch." "Cole, you can barely stand, which is why I'm sitting." He lowered himself to the floor with his back against the wall, the rifle across his lap. "Sleep. I'll wake you in a few hours and then we can switch." She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She lay down on the bedroll and was asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and steady. Cole watched her for a while, surprised by the protective feeling that rose in Persiana's chest. He'd spent 5 years building walls around himself, keeping everyone at arm's length, and now this woman had somehow gotten past all his defenses in the space of 3 days. He must have dozed off despite his intentions, because the next thing he knew, the sun was high overhead and someone was shaking his shoulder. He jerked awake, his hand going for the rifle, and found Tahana crouched beside him with her finger to her lips. "Listen," she whispered. Cole listened. At first he heard nothing but the wind through the broken walls and the cry of a hawk somewhere overhead. Then he heard voices, men's voices coming from somewhere outside the mission. He moved to the window and peered out carefully. 3 riders had dismounted near the well, watering their horses. Not Brennan, these men were different, younger, better dressed, with the look of ranch hands on legitimate business. One of them was studying the ground near the well, and Cole's stomach sank as he realized what the man was seeing, their footprints fresh and obvious in the dust. "Looks like someone's been here recently," the man called to his companions. "Maybe in the last hour or 2. "Could be drifters," another man said. "This place gets used sometimes by folks passing through. Or could be the ones Brennan's looking for. There's $200 on that girl's head now." Cole pulled back from the window and looked at Tahana. Her face was pale but composed, and she already had her knife in her hand. "3 of them," Cole whispered. "Ranch hands, probably. They might not want trouble. Or they might want $200. She was right. Cole checked his rifle, 4 rounds left, plus the 6 in his Colt. Not great odds if it came to a fight, but better than nothing. The voices outside grew closer. The men were moving toward the mission, drawn by curiosity or greed or both. Cole heard boots on stone, the creak of leather, the metallic click of a hammer being cocked. "Anyone in there?" one of the men called. "We don't mean no harm, just looking for some folks who might need help." Cole and Tahana stayed silent, barely breathing. Through the crack in the door, Cole could see shadows moving across the courtyard. "Come on out, we're not with Brennan, if that's what you're worried about. We work for the R Ranch over near Socorro. Heard there was a woman in trouble and figured we'd see if we could help." It could be a trap, or it could be genuine. There was no way to know for sure, and Cole had learned the hard way that trusting the wrong people could get you killed. But staying hidden meant these men would search the mission, and once they did, there'd be no avoiding a confrontation. Cole made a decision. He stood, keeping the rifle pointed at the ground, and pushed open the door. "We're here," he said, "and we are in trouble. But I need to know whose side you're on before we come out." The three men turned to face him. The one in front was tall and sun-weathered, with gray at his temples and steady eyes. He'd already lowered his gun, and he gestured for his companions to do the same. "Name's Tom Garrett," he said. "I'm foreman at the Double R. These are my men, Pete and Charlie. We heard Brennan's been tearing up the territory looking for an Apache woman and the man who took her. Also heard the woman wasn't exactly his property to begin with." "You heard right. Then we're on your side." Tom took a step forward, his hands visible and empty. "Brennan's been a thorn in this territory's side for years. Most folks are too scared to stand up to him, but that doesn't mean they like what he does. When word got out that someone had finally taken something from him, someone he had no right to own, well, let's just say there's more than a few of us who'd like to see him taken down a peg." Cole wanted to believe him, but belief was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Why should I trust you?" "Because if I wanted to turn you in for the bounty, I'd have shot you the moment you opened that door." Tom's voice was steady, reasonable. "And because my sister married an Apache man 20 years ago. They've got 3 kids, and they're some of the finest people I know. So when I hear about a man treating an Apache woman like property, it makes my blood boil." Slowly, carefully, Cole lowered the rifle. "Tahana," he called over his shoulder, "you can come out." She emerged from the room, still holding her knife, her eyes wary. The 3 men looked at her, and Cole saw recognition dawn in Tom's face. "I'll be damned," Tom said softly. "You're one of Red Sky's people, aren't you? From the village near White Sands." Tahana's grip on the knife tightened. "How do you know my people? My brother-in-law Joseph trades with them sometimes. He spoke of a young woman who could track a deer through bare rock and shoot straighter than most men." Tom's expression was gentle. He also spoke of the raid, said most of the village was killed or scattered. Joseph survived. For the first time since Cole had met her, Tahana's voice cracked with emotion. "He did. Last I heard, he was trying to find survivors, bring the people back together." Tom glanced at his men, then back at Tahana. "If you're willing, I can get word to him. Let him know you're alive." Tahana looked at Cole, and he saw the question in her eyes. This could be exactly what they needed: help allies a way out of this mess. Or it could be an elaborate trap. There was no way to know for certain. "What's your price?" Cole asked. "Nobody helps for free." Tom smiled faintly. "No price, just common decency. Though if you're asking what I want from you, I want you to tell me everything about Brennan's operation in Las Cruces. Who he works with, who protects him, how he moves his goods. I've got friends in Santa Fe who've been looking for a way to shut him down for years. You give me that information, and I'll make sure you 2 get safely out of this territory." It was more than Cole had dared hope for. He looked at Tahana again, and she gave a small nod. "Deal," Cole said. They spent the next hour sitting in the shade of the mission, while Cole told Tom everything he knew about Brennan, which wasn't much, but it was enough. Tahana added details about the boarding house, about the other captive women she'd seen, about the men who came and went at Brennan's command. Tom listened carefully, asking occasional questions, and his men took notes on a battered journal. When they were finished, Tom stood and stretched. "That's good information, real good. I'll get it to the marshal in Santa Fe, and with any luck, Brennan will be in chains by the end of the month." "What about the bounty?" Tahana asked. "There's money on my head now. People will keep looking." "Let me worry about that. I know a judge in Santa Fe who owes me a favor. We'll get the bounty revoked, make it clear you're under territorial protection." Tom pulled a canteen from his saddle and tossed it to Cole. "In the meantime, you 2 need to stay out of sight. Brennan's still out there, and he's got at least 3 men with him, maybe more if he picked up the tracker again." "The tracker might be dead," Cole said, and explained about the fight on the mountain trail. Tom's expression grew serious. "If he's alive, he'll be madder than a hornet. Men like that don't take kindly to losing their prey." He looked at Pete, the younger of his two companions. Go back to the ranch and get supplies, food, blankets, medical supplies. Bring them here by nightfall. Charlie, you ride to White Sands and find Joseph. Tell him his wife's niece is alive and that she needs him. The two men mounted their horses and rode off, leaving Tom alone with Cole and Tahana. There's something else you should know, Tom said once his men were gone. There's talk that Brennan's planning to leave the territory. Word is he knows you're headed for Santa Fe, and he figures the law there will protect you. So he's going to try to catch you before you get there, and if he can't, he's going to run rather than face charges. Where would he go? Cole asked. Mexico, probably. He's got connections down there, people who'll hide him for the right price. Tom sat down with his back against the mission wall. Point is, you've got maybe 3-4 days before he either catches you or gives up. If you can stay hidden that long, you're home free. 3 or 4 days. It didn't sound like much, but after the past 72 hours, it felt like a lifetime. We can manage that, Cole said. Tom nodded, then looked at Tahana. There's something I need to ask you, and I want you to answer honestly. Are you with this man by choice, or is he just another captor with a friendlier face? It was a fair question, and Cole didn't blame Tom for asking. Tahana was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. When he found me in that boarding house, I was ready to die, she said finally. I had decided that death was better than what they were going to do to me. And then this man, this stranger, he broke the window and gave me his coat and told me to run. He didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything, just helped because it was the right thing to do. She turned to look at Cole, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart skip. Since then, he's risked his life for me more times than I can count. He's gone hungry so I could eat. He's fought men twice his size to keep me safe. And not once has he treated me like I owe him anything. Her voice was strong, certain. So yes, I'm with him by choice. And if anyone tries to take me from him, they'll have to kill me first. Tom studied them both for a long moment, then nodded, satisfied. Good. That's what I needed to hear. He stood and walked to his horse, pulling a bundle from his saddlebag. I brought these just in case. Clean clothes for both of you, and some soap. There's a stream about a quarter-mile north of here, hidden by trees. You can wash up, change clothes, look a little less like fugitives. Cole took the bundle, feeling something like gratitude well up in his chest. Why are you doing all this? Because somebody has to. Tom swung into his saddle. And because I've seen too many good people get crushed by men like Brennan. If I can help stop that even just this once, then maybe this God-forsaken territory can become a place worth living in. He tipped his hat to them both and rode off, leaving Cole and Tahana alone in the quiet of the old mission. They found the stream exactly where Tom had said it would be, a clear ribbon of water flowing between stands of cottonwood trees. The sound of it was soothing after days of silence broken only by wind and the distant sound of pursuit. Cole turned his back while Tahana bathed, keeping watch on the approaches to their hiding spot. He heard her splash in the water, heard her soft gasp at the cold, and tried not to think about anything beyond the next few minutes. When she called that she was finished and dressed, he took his turn in the stream, scrubbing away days of sweat and dust and fear. The clothes Tom had brought were simple but clean, a cotton shirt and denim pants for Cole, and for Tahana, a simple dress in dark blue with a shawl to go over it. When Cole returned to where she waited, he almost didn't recognize her. Clean and properly dressed, her hair braided and falling over one shoulder, she looked like a different person, not the desperate fugitive from the boarding house, but a woman with dignity and purpose. You look good, he said, and immediately felt foolish for saying it, but Tahana smiled. So do you, less like an outlaw, more like a person. They walked back to the mission together, and for the first time since this had all started, Cole felt something almost like peace. They had allies now, they had a plan, and they had each other for whatever that was worth. That evening, as promised, Pete returned with supplies. He brought food and blankets, medical supplies for Tahana's feet, and news from the outside world. Brennan had been spotted in Socorro asking questions and making threats, The bounty hunter's body had been found at the base of the pass, alive but badly injured, and the territorial marshal had indeed taken an interest in the case, though whether that was good or bad news remained to be seen. "Tom says to stay here for 2 more days, Pete told them. "After that he'll come back with horses and an escort. You'll ride to Santa Fe under protection, and once you're there, the marshal will handle things." 2 more days. It wasn't much, but it felt like a gift. That night, Cole and Tahana sat by a small fire in the mission courtyard, sharing the food Pete had brought and talking quietly about the future. For the first time, that future seemed like something real, something possible rather than just a desperate hope. "What will you do?" Tahana asked. "After this is over, I mean, after Brennan is gone and the bounty is lifted. Where will you go?" Cole had been thinking about that question for days without finding an answer. "I don't know. I've spent so long just surviving, I'm not sure I remember how to do anything else." "You could stay in Santa Fe. Tom says it's a good town, lots of opportunities for someone with your skills." "What skills? Shooting people and running away?" "No." Tahana's voice was soft but firm. "Protecting people, standing up for what's right, refusing to look away when someone needs help." She paused. "Those are rare skills, Cole, rarer than you think." He looked at her across the fire, at the way the flames painted her face in gold and shadow. "What about you? Will you go back to your people?" "If Joseph can find them, yes, at least for a while, but—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "My people are scattered now. Many are dead. The ones who survived are trying to rebuild, but it's hard. The old ways are dying, and the new ways, the white man's ways, they don't leave much room for us." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's not your fault." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Besides, you're one of the few white men I've met who actually sees me as a person. That counts for something." Cole didn't know what to say to that. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a strip of leather he'd been working on earlier when Tahana had been sleeping. He'd twisted it into a simple ring, crude but functional. "I know this isn't much," he said, holding it out to her, "and I know we've only known each other a few days. But if we're going to keep telling people you're my wife, maybe you should have something to make it look real." Tahana took the leather ring, turning it over in her fingers. "Among my people, marriage isn't about gold or silver. It's about commitment, about 2 people choosing to face the world together." She slipped the ring onto her finger. "This is enough." Cole felt something in his chest expand, warm and bright. "So is that a yes?" "It's a yes to partnership, to standing together, to building something new instead of running from something old." She met his eyes across the fire. "Is that enough for you?" "It's more than enough." They sat in comfortable silence as the fire burned low and the stars came out overhead. Somewhere out there, Brennan was still hunting them. Somewhere out there, danger still waited. But for this one night in this quiet place, they were safe. They were together, and that was enough. The morning of the second day dawned clear and cold, with frost sparkling on the mission walls like scattered diamonds. Cole woke to find Tahana already up, standing in the courtyard and looking south toward the mountains they'd crossed. Something in her posture made him uneasy, a tension in her shoulders, an alertness that spoke of trouble. "What is it?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. I'm not sure, maybe nothing." She didn't take her eyes from the horizon. "But I have a feeling. My grandmother used to say our people could sense danger the way animals sense a coming storm. I always thought it was just superstition, but right now every instinct I have is screaming that something's wrong." Cole trusted those instincts. He'd learned in his cavalry days that the men who survived were the ones who listened to the quiet voice that said danger was near even when everything seemed peaceful. "What do you want to do? Be ready." She turned to face him. "Tom said 2 days. It's only been 1.5, but I think they're coming sooner than that." She was right. An hour later, Pete came riding hard up the valley, his horse lathered with sweat. He pulled up in a cloud of dust and practically fell from the saddle. "They're coming," he gasped. "Brennan and at least 6 men. They hit the ranch last night, beat Charlie half to death trying to get him to talk. He didn't break, but they figured out you were here anyway." Cole felt ice slide down his spine. "How far?" "Maybe an hour behind me. I rode straight through the night to warn you." Pete looked at Tahana, his young face pale. "Tom's gathering men, but they won't get here in time. You need to run, now." But Tahana was shaking her head. "We can't keep running. Eventually they'll catch us when we're too tired to fight, or we'll run into country we don't know. Better to make a stand here where we have walls and high ground." "Against 6 men," Pete's voice rose with panic. "That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's our choice." She looked at Cole. "What do you think?" Cole walked to the mission entrance and studied the surrounding terrain with a tactical eye he'd developed in 6 years of cavalry service. The mission sat on a slight rise with clear sightlines in all directions. The walls were thick adobe, good protection against small arms fire. There was only one entrance large enough for men to ride through, and it could be defended by 2 people if they were smart about it. "We can hold them," he said slowly. "Not forever, but long enough for Tom and his men to arrive, if we're lucky." "And if we're not lucky?" Pete asked. Cole didn't answer. They all knew what happened if luck ran out. Pete left 20 minutes later, riding hard for Tom's ranch to let them know Brennan was close. Before he went, he gave them what ammunition he had, another 12 rounds for Cole's rifle and a box of cartridges for his Colt. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Cole and Tahana spent the next half hour preparing their defense. They barricaded the main entrance with debris from the collapsed sections of wall, leaving just enough space to see and shoot through. Cole positioned himself on the left side with his rifle, while Tahana took the right with the Colt he'd taught her to shoot. Over the past 2 days, they piled extra ammunition within easy reach and filled every container they could find with water from the well. When the preparations were done, they waited. The sun climbed higher, and the silence pressed down on them like a physical weight. Cole's hands were steady on the rifle, but his heart hammered in his chest. This was different from the running and hiding. This was making a stand, and if it went wrong, there would be no escape. "Cole," Tahana said quietly, "if this doesn't work out, don't. I need to say it." She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with emotion. "These past few days with you have been the freest I've felt in 6 months, maybe in my whole life. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that." Cole reached across the space between them and took her hand. "We're going to get through this. Tom's coming with help, and we're going to hold out until he gets here, and then we're going to Santa Fe, and we're going to build that life we talked about." "You sound so certain." "I have to be, because the alternative is unacceptable." He squeezed her hand. "I lost my sister because I wasn't there to protect her. I'm not losing you too." Tahana smiled, and there was something fierce and beautiful in that smile. "Then I guess we'd better not die today." They saw the dust first, a brown smudge on the southern horizon, growing steadily larger. Then the riders emerged, 7 of them, in a loose formation with Brennan's distinctive bulk in the lead. They rode with the confidence of men who believed they'd already won, and that confidence made Cole's jaw tighten with anger. The riders stopped about 200 yards from the mission entrance just outside rifle range. Brennan dismounted and took a few steps forward, his hands on his hips as he surveyed the mission. "Maddox," he shouted, "I know you're in there, and I know you can hear me." Cole didn't answer. Silence was a weapon too, and he planned to use it. "You've led me on quite a chase, I'll give you that." Brennan's voice carried clearly in the still air. "But it ends now. Send out the woman and I'll let you ride away. You've got my word on it." Tahana snorted. "His word isn't worth the breath it takes to speak it." "I know." Cole kept his eyes on the riders. 2 of them had split off and were circling around to the east, trying to flank them. "They're not going to try talking for long." He was right. Brennan gestured to his men, and suddenly the air was full of gunfire. Bullets slammed into the adobe walls, sending up puffs of dust, and one came through the gap in their barricade close enough that Cole felt the wind of its passing. He returned fire, taking his time, making each shot count. His first bullet caught one of the flanking riders in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. His second shot hit another man's horse, and the animal went down, throwing its rider hard. Beside him, Tahana was firing the Colt with surprising accuracy for someone who'd barely handled a gun before this week. She wasn't hitting anyone, but she was making Brennan's men keep their heads down, and that was almost as valuable. The gunfight settled into a rhythm. The crack of rifles, the whine of ricochets, the shouted orders from Brennan as he tried to coordinate his men. Cole counted ammunition with every shot, aware that they only had so many rounds and had to make each one matter. After 10 minutes, Brennan called a ceasefire. 2 of his men were down, one bleeding heavily from Cole's first shot, the other limping from where Tahana had shot him in the leg. The rest had taken cover behind rocks and scrub, and Brennan himself had retreated back to where his horse waited. "You're only making this harder on yourself," Brennan shouted. "I've got all day. You're going to run out of ammunition long before I do." He was probably right about that. Cole had maybe 20 rounds left. Tahana had fewer than that. But Tom and his men were coming, and every minute they held out was a minute closer to salvation. The second assault came without warning. 3 of Brennan's men rushed the entrance on foot, while the others provided covering fire. Cole dropped the first man with a shot to the chest, but the other 2 made it to the barricade and started tearing it apart with their bare hands. Cole reversed his rifle and swung it like a club, catching one man across the face and sending him sprawling. The other man got through the gap and went for Tahana, but she was ready. She sidestepped his lunge and brought the Colt down hard on the back of his skull. He went down and didn't move. Before Cole could congratulate her more, gunfire erupted from the eastern wall. Brennan had sent men around to attack from multiple directions, and the barricade only protected the main entrance. Cole ran to the window and fired 3 quick shots, driving the attackers back, but he knew it was only temporary. "We can't defend all sides at once," Tahana called. She was right. The mission was too big, and there were only 2 of them. Cole's mind raced through their options, and none of them were good. They could retreat to one of the small rooms and make a final stand there, but that would just trap them. They could make a run for it on foot, but Brennan's men on horseback would run them down in minutes. Then he heard hoofbeats, lots of them, coming from the north. For a moment, Cole's heart leaped with hope. Tom and his men arriving just in time, but then he saw the dust cloud and his heart sank. There were too many riders, at least a dozen, and they were moving too fast. This wasn't a rescue. This was reinforcements for Brennan. "Cole," Tahana said quietly, and he heard the acceptance in her voice. She'd reached the same conclusion he had. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. But Cole wasn't ready to give up. He'd survived 6 years on the frontier by refusing to quit even when everything looked hopeless, and he wasn't about to start now. "The bell tower," he said suddenly. "If we can get up there, we'll have a better position, higher ground, better line of sight. The ladder's half rotted. It'll hold. It has to." They ran through the mission interior, bullets chasing them, and reached the base of the bell tower. The ladder was indeed half rotted, and several rungs were missing entirely, but they didn't have a choice. Cole went first, testing each rung before putting his full weight on it, and somehow made it to the top without falling. Tahana followed, moving with the agility of someone who'd grown up climbing trees and cliffs. The bell tower was small and cramped, and the floor creaked alarmingly under their weight. But Cole had been right about the view. From up here, he could see the entire valley, including Brennan's men closing in from 3 sides and the cloud of dust from the north growing steadily closer. He aimed carefully and fired. One of Brennan's men dropped. He fired again, and another man went down. Beside him, Tahana was doing the same with the Colt, and between them, they were making Brennan's advance very costly. But the ammunition was running out. Cole was down to his last 5 rounds. Tahana had 3 left. and the riders from the north were getting closer. Then Cole heard something that made his breath catch, a voice clear and strong cutting through the gunfire. "Brennan, stand down. This is Marshal William Tucker of the Territorial Court, and you are under arrest." Cole looked toward the riders and felt hope surge through him. They weren't reinforcements for Brennan. They were Tom and his men riding alongside a tall man in a black coat with a silver star on his chest. And behind them, at least 20 armed riders. Brennan saw them too, and his face went white. For a moment, Cole thought the man might try to fight anyway, to go down in a blaze of gunfire rather than surrender. But Brennan was a bully and a coward at heart, and bullies always folded when faced with real opposition. "Drop your weapons," the marshal ordered, and this time there was no mistaking the authority in his voice. One by one, Brennan's men threw down their rifles and raised their hands. Brennan was the last to comply, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. Tom and several of his men dismounted and began collecting weapons and binding prisoners. The marshal rode up to the base of the bell tower and looked up at Cole and Tahana. "You two can come down now. It's over." Cole looked at Tahana and she looked back at him, and suddenly they were both laughing, not with humor, but with relief so profound it had to find some outlet. They climbed down the ladder carefully, and when they reached the ground, Cole's legs almost gave out beneath him. Tom was there to steady him. "Told you I'd get here in time. You cut it pretty close. That's the only way I know how to do things." Tom grinned. "The marshal and I had a long talk last night. Turns out he's been looking for a reason to arrest Brennan for years. Your testimony gave him exactly what he needed." The marshal himself approached, studying Cole and Tahana with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Mr. Maddox, Miss Tahana, just Tahana. Miss Tahana, I'm Marshal Tucker. I have a lot of questions for both of you, but they can wait until we get you somewhere safe and comfortable." He gestured toward one of his men who brought forward 2 horses. "Tom's already told me the basics of your story. If it's true, and I believe it is, then you have nothing to fear from the law. In fact, you've done this territory a service by exposing Brennan's operation." Cole watched as Brennan was loaded onto a horse, his hands bound behind his back. The man's eyes found Cole's across the distance, and there was nothing but hatred in them. "He'll escape," Tahana said quietly. "Men like him always find a way." But Marshal Tucker shook his head. "Not this time. I've been waiting 5 years for enough evidence to make charges stick. Between your testimony and what I've already gathered, Brennan's going to hang, and his entire network is going down with him." They rode north in a long column surrounded by the marshal's men and Tom's ranch hands. Cole kept expecting to wake up to find that this was all some desperate dream conjured by his exhausted mind, but the sun was warm on his face and Tahana was riding beside him, real and alive, and the nightmare that had started in that boarding house in Las Cruces was finally truly over. They reached Santa Fe 3 days later. The city was larger than Cole had expected, with adobe buildings clustered around a central plaza and mountains rising in the distance. Marshal Tucker took them to his office and spent hours taking their statements, writing everything down in careful script. When he was finally satisfied, he leaned back in his chair and studied them both. "You're free to go," he said. "Both of you. The bounty's been revoked, and I'll make sure word spreads that anyone still looking for you is going to answer to me." He paused. "Where will you go now?" Cole looked at Tahana. "I don't know. We haven't really talked about it." "Well, if you're looking for suggestions, Tom told me you're a decent shot and good in a crisis. I could use a deputy if you're interested. Pay's not great, but it's honest work." It was the kind of opportunity Cole hadn't dared hope for, a chance to start over, to be part of something legitimate. "I'll think about it." The marshal nodded and turned to Tahana. "And you, miss?" Tom said something about family. "My Uncle Joseph. Tom sent word to him." "He's here," the marshal said. "Been waiting 2 days for you to arrive. He's at the hotel across the plaza." Tahana's hand went to her mouth and tears spilled down her cheeks. "He's really here. Go see for yourself." They found Joseph exactly where the marshal said he'd be, standing on the hotel porch like he'd been carved from stone. He was a tall man with weathered features and eyes that had seen too much sorrow, but when he saw Tahana, those eyes lit up with joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. "Little bird," he said in Apache, opening his arms. Tahana ran to him and they held each other for a long time, both of them crying. Cole stood back, giving them space, feeling like an intruder on something private and sacred. Finally, Joseph pulled back and looked at Cole. "You're the one who saved her." "I'm the one who happened to be there," Cole corrected. "No." Joseph's voice was firm. "Tom told me what you did, how you risked everything for someone you didn't know. That's not just being there, that's choosing to be a man of honor." He extended his hand. "Thank you for giving me back my family." Cole shook his hand, unsure what to say. Joseph turned back to Tahana and spoke to her in Apache for several minutes. Cole couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Questions concerned checking that she was truly all right. Then Tahana said something and Joseph's eyebrows rose. He looked at Cole again, this time with something like amusement in his expression. "She says you two are married." Cole felt heat rise to his face. "It's complicated." "Marriage usually is," Joseph smiled. "She also says it started as a lie to protect her, but somewhere along the way it became something real." "It did," Cole said, finding his voice. "If that's all right with you. If it's not, if there are customs I've violated or—" Joseph held up a hand. "Among our people, marriage is about choice and commitment. Tahana chose you, and you chose her. That's all that matters." He paused. "But if you hurt her, I will find you. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Good. Then welcome to the family." That night, Joseph arranged a small gathering at the hotel, a handful of Apache families who'd survived the raids and were slowly rebuilding their lives in Santa Fe. They shared food and stories, and someone brought out a drum and started playing. Cole sat with Tahana beside him, watching her reconnect with her people, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 5 years. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but people. Connection, belonging. Later, when the celebration had wound down and most people had drifted off to bed, Cole and Tahana stood on the hotel porch, looking out at the sleeping city. The stars were bright overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. "What are you thinking?" Tahana asked. "That I never expected any of this." Cole gestured vaguely at the city, at the life that was suddenly opening before them. "A week ago, I was just trying to get through another day, and now you have a job offer and a wife and a future." She smiled. "It's a lot to process." "It is." He turned to face her. "Are you sure about this, about me? Your uncle said marriage is about choice, and you've got choices now. You could go back with Joseph, rebuild your life with your people. You don't have to tie yourself to some broken-down cavalry scout just because I happened to kick down the right door at the right time." Tahana reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his cheek. "You're right. I do have choices now, and I choose you. Not because I owe you, or because I'm grateful, or because I don't have anywhere else to go. I choose you because when I think about the future, you're the person I want to build it with." Cole pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be married, or how to be part of a community, or how to stop looking over my shoulder, waiting for everything to fall apart." "Then we'll learn together," Tahana said, echoing the words she'd spoken days ago by the campfire. "We'll make mistakes and figure things out and build something new. That's what life is." "Sounds hard." "It will be," she smiled. But I'd rather face a hard life with you than an easy one with anyone else." The next morning, Cole accepted the marshal's offer. He was sworn in as a deputy, given a badge and a small house on the edge of town. Tahana moved in with him, and slowly, carefully, they began to build the life they'd dreamed about during those desperate days of running. Joseph visited often, bringing news of the scattered Apache families who were finding their way back to each other. Some had settled near Santa Fe, others had moved farther north, but they were surviving, adapting, refusing to let the violence and loss destroy them completely. Tom came by one day with Margaret from the ranch where they'd gotten help, and over dinner the four of them laughed and told stories like old friends. Margaret looked at Tahana's leather ring and smiled. "You should get her a proper one," she told Cole. "I will," Cole promised, "when I've saved enough." But Tahana shook her head. "This one is perfect. It reminds me of where we started and how far we've come." 6 months later, Cole stood on that same hotel porch where he'd stood with Tahana on their first night in Santa Fe. So much had changed. His house was now a home filled with furniture they'd made together and food they'd cooked together and memories they were building day by day. His badge felt natural on his chest now, and the marshal had told him he was one of the best deputies he'd ever had. But more than any of that, he'd learned something he'd thought was impossible after Mary's death. He'd learned to let someone in, to trust, to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was worth loving. Tahana came out to join him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cool evening air. She'd started teaching Apache language and crafts to children in the settlement, and her students adored her. She'd found purpose and community and healing, and watching her bloom had been one of the greatest privileges of Cole's life. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "About how I almost walked away that night in Las Cruces, about how close I came to being a coward one more time." "But you didn't walk away." "No, I didn't." He turned to look at her. "You saved me that night, you know, as much as I saved you, maybe more." Tahana smiled and leaned against him, and they stood there in comfortable silence as the sun bent over Santa Fe. Behind them was a past full of pain and loss and violence. Before them was a future full of uncertainty and challenge and work, but they faced it together, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes of what they'd lost. That was courage. That was love. That was the only thing worth fighting for in this hard, beautiful, unforgiving world. And as the stars came out one by one overhead, Cole knew with absolute certainty that every choice he'd made since hearing that cry in the boarding house had been worth it, because dignity could not be traded, and love was simply the courage to see someone as free, and together they had built something that no one could ever take away.